I'm Jack Ruston, welcome to Ruston's Boneyard. Now today, join me in a little bit of a brining experiment. So here I've got some lovely beef short rib, and I love short rib, I love smoked beef short rib out on the barbecue. Now the problem is that in order to get that connective tissue, all that collagen broken down so we get that nice melting sticky texture, we need to get the internal temperature up to about 95 degrees centigrade. And in that low, slow smoking environment of about 110 degrees centigrade, it can take a long time. And sometimes we don't know exactly how long it's going to take. It's a bit unpredictable. It could be 6 hours, it could be 8 hours. Now, what I want to try to do is to speed that process up, to smoke the ribs hotter. Maybe go for temperature something more like about 150, 175 degrees centigrade to get that internal temperature up a bit faster. Now, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that as we do that, we're going to be applying a lot of quite aggressive heat to the outside of the meat, and the chances are we might dry it out. It's going to depend to a certain degree on how much fat coverage there is on the meat and indeed within the meat. But, you know, there's normally a reason why we do these things at low temperature for a long time rather than going hotter and faster like we can do in the oven. If we're braising, if we have liquid in the meat, if it's covered, we can crank that temperature up and get it within 2 or 3 hours. We can get it really quite melted down. So we're going to try to replicate a bit of that. And how are we going to do it? Well, this batch of short rib has been dry brined. I literally just sprinkled salt over it and put it in the fridge overnight. This identical batch from the same piece has been wet brined. So what I've done is I've created a solution of 6% brine, which is 300 grams of salt to 5 litres of water. And I've soaked these pieces overnight in the wet brine. Now, what we're going to do is just pat them dry, and we're going to put these side by side into the smoker and see whether the water that's been moved into the meat by a process of osmosis, which occurs when you put meat into salty water, there's a differential between the concentration of salt in and out, and it causes water to flow into the meat. We're going to see whether this protects the meat against those hotter temperatures. So let's see what we can do. Let's go out to the barbecue and I'll show you how I've got that set up. Okay, so this is a standard 22-inch Weber kettle barbecue. Now on the left I've got space for my fuel, which is going to come from the starter chimney, and on the right I've just got this enamel tray with some water in it. We've just got a few coals here. Now it's very important just to give this a rub down with a brush. If we don't, we run the risk of getting oily residue from the surface of the grill onto our meat, which we do not want. Let's scatter a few wood chips into here, create a bit of smoke, and shut the lid. Now we'll just crack the vent at the top. So just a quick word on the brine. Now I'm using a 6% brine, and that worked out for the 5 litres of water that I needed to about 300 grams of salt. Now often people will also then add aromats, things like peppercorns, bay leaves, you know, little bits of herbs and spices and garlic and these kinds of things. Now, what you then do is to bring it to the boil and let it all infuse before cooling it completely. You never want to put meat into a warm brine, because what's going to happen is it's going to start to cook, the bacteria will start to multiply, to increase, but then instead of bringing it up to temperature, you're then cooling it down again, which is not safe. So what we want to do is to let any brine completely cool. Now, in the interests of equality between the two sides of my little experiment, the dry brined meat has only got salt on it, so I only put salt into my wet brine. Now, that allowed me to just use very slightly warm water, which made that whole cooling process much faster. But if you are going to make up brines, just be aware they do take a bit of time to cool down. See how it's looking. Oh yeah, look, it's all starting to look like it's properly cooking. Give it a few more wood chips. Okay, so we're on about 160 degrees centigrade. Let's have a look. Things are looking pretty decent. I'm going to top up the coals because I want to go to the gym. and I don't want it to go out. Now I'm using this restaurant grade lumpwood charcoal here. Scatter, scatter. Okay, well now it's started to rain, which is pretty typical for the British summer. Let's have a look. Oh, it's looking good. Okay, so let's check some temperatures, and that is 90. Okay, so I've swapped these around now to put the dry brines closer to the cold, just to catch them up a little bit. And what we can see quite obviously is that they have that reddy tinge on them, that reddish smoke ring tinge, whereas the wet brined ones don't so much. Okay, so we're now at 4 hours. Still raining, unfortunately. Let's have a look and see what we've got going on here with our temperatures. Okie doke, so beautiful. Let's see what we're doing now. 94.2, that'll do. Let's get that off. 94.5. Okay, here are our pieces, and we're just going to let them rest for a few minutes because, you know, after all, they have been cooking at a hotter temperature, so they could stand to just calm down and just stop all of the fats and water inside just moving around. Okay, so here's the moment of truth. Let's have a look at these and see if there's any real difference between them now. So this is the dry brine. Let's cut this one. We've definitely got that quite defined smoke ring, the pink line. Let's see what the equivalent wet brine is like. It's definitely also got that smoke ring. Let's taste and just see. Okay. Nice. The dry brine. Also nice. Having tasted these, I just don't think that the wet brining has made enough of a difference, you know, in terms of the texture. You know, they're both nice. I just don't think that there's an appreciable difference between the two. Not that you couldn't account for just with the fact of it being a slightly different part of the cut. So, you know, for me, I think the dry brine has a slightly better beef flavour. The wet brine seems a little washed out, which is, I guess, kind of to be expected. It hasn't really brought enough in the way of texture to compensate for the fact that it's slightly washed the flavour out. I'd be interested to know if you try this, what you think. Have a good day, you guys. Keep cooking.